Welcome to empowerME Conversations, a podcast from the Atlantic Council. This show brings you leaders from business and government that shape the future of Middle East economies. I'm your host, Amjad Ahmad, Director and Resident Senior Fellow. Let's get started. The food and beverage sector in the Middle East is currently worth $135 billion and is projected to grow to nearly $160 billion in the coming 5 years. More importantly, a young and tech-savvy population is leading the transformation of the F&B sector. The expansion of new technologies, including food delivery apps and virtual kitchens, and the increasing frequency of out-of-home dining is driving opportunity. Pepsi and its iconic brands have been a staple in the region for decades and have supported key initiatives on climate change, entrepreneurship, and women empowerment. We will discuss these topics and more with a 13-year veteran and leader of the company, Tamer Mosalam, Vice President and General Manager for the GCC and Levant, based in Saudi Arabia. Welcome, Tamer.
Thank you very much, Amjad, for the opportunity, and it's great to be with you today.
Great to have you. I wanted to start by setting the scene today. Obviously, we've had a pandemic, lots of challenges economically, globally, as well as regionally. Tell us what you're seeing today on the ground, and where are we on that curve of recovery?
Thank you, Amjad. I think it's a great question because all of us have really experienced a totally different life in the past 18 to 24 months. And I think this have impacted a lot of consumers, a lot of human beings on different parts of the world. And I think that there is a lot of new trends has came out to play. So let me zoom on here a little bit, and I will talk a bit about our consumers. And I think consumers move to what we have realized and really defined to be consumer at home, or home as a hub, because basically we've been locked down for quite some time. This comes in a lot of parts of the world. However, if we zoom on the Middle East, a lot of countries and a lot of markets were very strict about COVID-19 restrictions and regulations, of course. So that made every consumer think of a different way of spending time. So when we say that home as a hub, so people working from home, educating their kids from home, doing their exercises every morning from home. Of course, screen time took a lot of time from family sitting together in the evenings and late afternoons. And that really brought a totally different consumption behavior and trends, if you wish to say. Of course, e-commerce and e-trading is something that evolved nicely over 6 months since the pandemic hit us all. And this is another evolution that really mandate a totally different way of reaching consumers, and even it will change the way you market your brands and the messages that you want to pass to your consumers as well. So I would say it's a good change because it will challenge the marketeer of the world. So it will challenge the business leaders of the world in order to make sure that we cope in a totally different way with the consumer demand as we move forward.
And are we seeing the same trends that we see globally in the Middle East, such as consumers looking for healthier products, things that are possibly sustainable? What are you noticing in terms of consumer trends in the region?
I think the Middle East is privileged with a younger population. This is going to be the theme of the coming 20 years. And this is something that it will put a pressure on every single food and beverage entity in order to make sure that they cope with the new trends. Healthier products, of course, it's a new trend, but before it's a trend, as a company, we are very keen to deliver big on sustainability. And part of sustainability is how you will really innovate on a healthier product and a healthier proposition to consumer. So definitely will be an innovation to be looking at and an innovation to invest in order to make sure that you provide consumer and a younger cohorts with more healthier products. That will happen on the beverage, will happen on the snacking front, of course.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned changes due to the pandemic. We're seeing many countries focus on resiliency, especially as it comes to their food supply. Um, Tell us about your production capacity in the region, and will you change your strategy going forward in terms of production in the region?
I think for the Middle East operation, we were lucky because we're producing out of Saudi Arabia, so that's our manufacturing hub for the GCC and Levant. And if you look into the GCC unity, you will find that we were lucky because all borders were open, and of course, the commercial exchange was not impacted by the COVID-19. However, to your point, Amjad, I think you have some companies will look into decentralizing their manufacturing hubs because of what we have learned out of the pandemic period, but also leverage on the scale of the business. And there is a plus and minuses for all that. But more on the top of that is localizing your big part of your manufacturing requirements, and raw material, making sure that you have alternatives that comes to the board that will help you with the cost of doing business, but also make sure that you always have that procurement and supply chain not being impacted by a big learning like the pandemic coming our way. So supply chain will remain to be one of the top challenges for a lot of companies. And of course, this is an area where a lot of technologies are coming in, a lot of innovation when it comes to material planning, when it comes to manufacturing material as well, will have an evolution in the coming 10 years.
Do you think the agri-tech movement in the Middle East is viable? And do you see technologies coming in to help create more sustainable crops in our area?
Sustainable agriculture is the name of the game, and this is where PepsiCo is really investing heavily for the great cause of giving consumer a better food, for the sake of really delivering big when it comes to water savings, and of course also to help our growers to really make a better scale of economy for the land they're agriculturing. So I think there is a lot of initiatives that will come in the coming 5 years to deliver on that. So whether it's agricultural technologies or something that will help the agricultural landscape to deliver better sustainability when it comes to the major crops being planted in the Middle East, I think will be one of the major sustainability goals for PepsiCo, but also for a lot of the governments that they will be looking into that as part of their visions as well.
Yes, agreed. You know, you've mentioned several areas where technology now is coming in and changes are happening. Aside from what you're doing internally, how do you engage with the entrepreneurial ecosystem across the region as a company and you yourself as an executive?
Let me start with the importance of startups and entrepreneurship to grow economies. And I think a lot of the countries in the Middle East will require to give a great kind of support to entrepreneurship and startups. And it's going to start with the policy making. So how can you really help them to get the right level of funding? How you get them the right level of protection when it comes to taxation? How you provide them innovation hubs in order for them to really excel when it comes to scaling up their business, but also having the right level of support across different areas of the ideas, businesses, and how can scale up ideas in a big way. And I think will require very flexible regulations, but also make sure that you have a training and coaching and incubator hubs across the region in order to make sure that you reduce the number of failures when it comes to startups and small businesses as they arise. You know that the failure ratio within startups is very high.
Yes.
So every 10 projects, you will find probably only 2 that will succeed. But this is is enough reason for all the big corporates, but also the governments, that they really make sure that those younger generations has the right guidance, but also have the right policies to protect their ideas and really encourage them even when they face failures. So that's, I think, the evolution that has to take place in the Middle East when it comes to supporting startups and entrepreneurship.
And how are you as a company interacting with these startups? Are you using them for certain services? Are you getting supplies? What type of interaction can entrepreneurs look for when it comes to Pepsi?
I think where PepsiCo was one of the privileged companies that we've worked on a couple of programs for entrepreneurs and startups in different countries within the region. Let me give you a little bit of illustration on that. First, I think we have done one big competition in the past for entrepreneurship to come and give us ideas about healthier foods, healthier packaging, and that was a great platform for younger generation to come in with great ideas. Second, we've launched a couple of years ago, specifically in 2019, a great program in Saudi called Tamakani. And that program really delivers on two main verticals. The first vertical is how to empower women in Saudi Arabia. Second is how to encourage female students out of the top 5 universities in Saudi to come in and give us, again, a great ideas and innovative ways to improve in our portfolio, but also help to us to reach the consumer in a more innovative way. And let me tell you that both programs have really delivered great ideas. And to go back to your question, in several markets we've been able to help some of the entrepreneurs to scale up their ideas, but also bring them in as a startup suppliers in some of our production and manufacturing areas. And I think this is where the big corporates like PepsiCo can really encourage those younger generation to really scale up their thinking, have that kind of interaction with executives, but also get the right coaching and training along the way as well.
Yeah, I mean, you said it really well. I think corporates have such a great role in the ecosystem because they can help startups scale significantly very quickly. So it's really great that you're engaging with different startups across the region. You know, you've been involved yourself personally in a lot of entrepreneurship and mentoring. What spaces excite you from what you're seeing today in the Middle East? What are the sort of top things that you're excited about in terms of sectors that you're seeing from these entrepreneurs?
I think technology and digitalization will remain to be the most exciting space in the coming 5 to 10 years. A lot of companies will be investing in analytics, digitalization, and the total system in order to enable the businesses to deliver better results, but also be on the same page with all the change of dynamics that's happening across the world. So digitalization, analytics, I think this is going to be a big thing. Second space will be the e-commerce. I think this will continue to grow. It grew actually nicely and dramatically in the past 24 months. We've seen some businesses have tripled and grew 5x their size in a very short time. But also that will require a great evolution when it comes to customer service. So customer service will come third, and it will continue to be an opportunity for a lot of small and medium-sized businesses to double down on customer service and where you can serve consumer in a better way, in a much stronger way. Supply chain, to our previous topic that we've discussed together a few days ago, I think supply chain will continue to be a great space to invest in and to bring technology to complement that bigger picture as well. So digitalization will continue to be a bigger enabler for supply chain as we move forward. And of course, I would say entertainment, sports, and healthier F&B proposition, that will continue to be a great place to innovate, to start small, but end up big. So that I would say the areas where the future of investments and the future of startups would work very well across those areas.
Yes, I think what's been interesting is, as you mentioned, not only have we seen growth, for example, in e-commerce, but the economics have gotten more attractive because more people are doing digital payments, less cash on delivery, logistics is improving. So it's been interesting to watch that cycle. When it comes to supply chain, we just did an event, and you participated about plugging women into the supply chain. We're seeing a lot more activity from governments to drive women economic empowerment. Saudi has come a long way in the last couple of years, and actually there was an article in FT yesterday about this. Tell us what you're seeing. You're at the front lines of this, and you had some great insights during that event. What are you seeing in terms of women, first getting more active in the economy, but where do you see the opportunities in plugging into the supply chain?
And I think that specifically in Saudi Arabia, and let me double down on that, women participation and empowerment are moving nicely in the right direction. I think women in Saudi are driven by passion, by great participation to the social transformation, but also they're very keen to be part of the 2030 vision and how that country should evolve nicely to be one of the greatest economies of the world. And with the rise of the private sector and with the rise of the national projects that currently being invested in by the government and the policymakers, I think that will help a lot of opening a lot of jobs, but also enriching the labor market, if you wish to say. Female participation into that will be a key success criteria. As a company, what we have seen is a great signs of participation from women coming to our business community. And I would say that even the government and the policymakers are having a very good conversation with the private sector. So, for example, we've been able to approve the women to be part of our second shifts in our manufacturing facilities. And that was a major breakthrough.
Right.
Second, we had the first forklift female driver in one of our plants in Saudi Arabia. That is a great thing to see. In a couple of weeks, we'll have our first female plant manager looking over our biggest manufacturing facility in Riyadh. So that's another big achievements that we will be bragging about for quite some time.
As you should.
I would say that great talents coming in, and there is a great opportunities that will arise by the strong contribution of the private sector. But also I have to give it back to the policymakers because they are continue to support women empowerment as one of the pillars for the Vision 2030. So I have no doubt that this will come nicely and women will continue to rise when it comes to the number of female representation in any organization.
Yes, I mean, I've worked with plenty of Saudi women. I think it was such a great asset that was underutilized. But it seems now the policies have really started moving in the right direction. So I wanted to ask you, we're starting to get a lot of people touching base with us about how to enter the Middle East. And, given that we look at economic issues and trying to get our feedback, as an executive who's operated there for many years, what advice would you have for a new American firm that hasn't operated yet in the Middle East? What advice would you give them?
I think companies that they don't have, or at least they did not establish a strong footprint in the Middle East until now, they're missing a big opportunity of growth. That region will continue to evolve and will continue to grow. And of course, you have the population to support the consumption as well. But also the consumers in the Middle East are becoming very sophisticated. So they're not less demanding than the consumer you see in Europe or the consumer you see in the US and Canada, for example. So I think will put a pressure as well on companies or new investor coming in to come in with an added value to the market, but also come with a great lens. How can they take that market 2 and 3 steps ahead when it comes to digitalization, new trends, and establishing new industries of the future, if you wish to say. Of course, will be always challenged by political instability sometime, pandemic some other time, and maybe some of the financial obstacles coming in and out. However, that region proved to be very resilient. You have the resources, you have the financing, you have the oil, you have a big economies, and you have the population. So it will continue to be a great growth vectors for a lot of companies.
Tamer, what's your feeling on Egypt's direction right now? I mean, we're also seeing an exciting startup ecosystem there, but you hear different things about how to operate there. What are you seeing in that market as Pepsi and as yourself, as someone who's engaged with entrepreneurs?
Egypt has been always one of our big bets markets globally for PepsiCo. So both Saudi Arabia and Egypt are 2 big markets that we're putting a lot of investments and a lot of focus on. However, to answer your question, I think Egypt has a great future to come. So the coming 10 years will be the golden years of Egypt, driven by the following. First, a very strong banking system that has been able to establish a very good policies when it comes to not only controlling the foreign currency, but also making sure that they are really upgrading the banking system, that it's one of the great enablers for investors to come in and put money into the country. Second thing is the infrastructure investment that has been taking place in the country for the past 5 years. Billions and billions of dollars in roads, infrastructure, electricity, water facilities, and of course, a lot of has been spent into establishing industrial cities that can really help investors to come and find the right infrastructure for them to start up their investment when it comes to manufacturing and industrial revolution. And you have a very strong base of consumers as well. And that consumer, you have your A and B consumer, you have the middle class, you have the lower middle class, and then you have, of course, some of your DE consumers that all of them are consuming in a different occasion, different incomes, different, of course, spendings, very similar to the mega markets across the world. The one thing that I see that has to evolve nicer and faster is the administration policies of the country. So how the government will cope with the new regulations, how they will invest in the human capital in order to make sure that they have better government support to investors, and of course, how that will facilitate, to your point, the startups and entrepreneurial revolution that coming to the country as well.
Do you feel that it's getting easier, and maybe easy is not the right word, but less challenging for startups to scale across countries in the Middle East, or is integration still an issue from your perspective?
It's not going to be easy, to be honest. I think it might take a longer time, but it's not impossible. Right. Because when you scale up and then you make sure that your revenues are growing year on year and that you're evolving your operating model or your technology, for example, in order to make sure that you are capturing the opportunity of transaction, that gives you the opportunity to exit. And when you have that appeal to exit, that comes the integration of startups and entrepreneurs into a bigger entities, to a bigger companies that can take them to the different level. So I think it will happen eventually, but it needs a little bit of patience and a little bit of guidance and a little bit of luck, of course, because luck is very important when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, you've highlighted an exciting future for several of the large markets in the region. When it comes to the F&B sector in particular, where are you focusing in the next decade? Where do you see the big opportunities in that area?
I think in our portfolio, if I want to reflect about the coming 5 years and where we will be doubling down, I think we're going to be doubling down on innovation and healthier innovation. So, what is the oatmeal of the future? What would be our hydration innovation that we'll bring to the market? How can we have sustainable packaging and really serve the consumer in a more sustainable way? And of course, making sure that we are delivering on the plant-based snacking opportunities as well. So that will be more or less where we will be doubling down. Big part of it to serve our PEP positive and sustainability journey that we've just announced. And another part of it is how can you really give consumer choices and a healthier choices with a twist of sustainability into it as well, because that's the great cause that we are integrating very well into our day-to-day business. It's not anymore as an optional thing. We have to deliver on that, and we have very firm commitment to the world by 2025, by 2030, and by 2040 as well.
Yeah, it's a very big challenge, and I think many companies are struggling with how to get there. You mentioned product, but what about the other side of that equation, which is distribution? Because that's also changing thanks to innovation. You have a lot of direct-to-home players. You have delivery apps now. You have the retail market itself sort of bifurcating and changing. How do you see that playing out in these markets?
I think I've read a couple of articles once about how e-grocery is growing in China, for example. So in China, you get into an app and you make your grocery selection. Everything is e-payment, and everything is really being put in a virtual technology that gives you that thousand of choices as you sit on your phone. I think the Middle East will not be any less than that. It might take some time to evolve into that, versus the traditional way of taking your car or take a walk and go to the supermarket across the corner. So that will come our way anyway. And to your point, Amjad, I think this will transform the way you do supply chain. So that also will make you think whether you replace your own delivery trucks with delivery companies, or by that you will have more friendly and more environment-friendly trucks going around the city, or the consumer will go and pick their products from a distribution hub that's all work with technology as well. I think the sky is the limit when it comes to that. China have done it, and I think a lot of business models across the world have done that. So think about Amazon, think about Alibaba, think about the e-grocery and e-kiosks that has been evolving nicely in a big part of the world. And by the way, this is one of the things that we have done in Expo 2020 this year. We've came with an e-kiosk in the middle of the Expo site where it's only consumer interacting with the vending machines. So no one is there. You go, you put your credit cards, you pick your choice, you get it, you check out, and you go from the other side. And I think this will be the evolution of the future, and in the very near future. It's not going to be something like 20 years from now.
Right. Can't wait to see that. Going now towards the consumer side, that's also changing, right? How you interact with the consumer. How are you changing that? I mean, of course, digital is probably a big part of that, but what else are you looking at in the future that's going to change in terms of how you capture the consumer?
I think as a company, we're doubling down on two major capabilities which we call them the capability of the future. One is the DX, which basically how you merchandise your products and how you put that message to the consumer in the point of sale. And I think this is one big capability that we're building not in the past couple of years, but also we're evolving that in the coming 3 years as well. Second thing is the consumer insights. How can you continue the dialogue and the social listening with the consumer in order to make sure what kind of trends are changing? And let me tell you that there is some trends that are changing month on month. And to that, will change a lot your communication to the consumer. So whether you will continue to double down on social media, whether you will have that first party data coming in as one big enabler to send direct messages to your consumer base, or you will evolve to a totally new communication platform that comes for the future. However, I would say that analytics will play a major role. First party data will play a major role, but also social media driving certain messages and certain consumption trends and sharing those narratives, brand narratives, pack price, and the whole communication to the consumers will evolve nicely on social media.
And we've seen a global emergence of direct-to-consumer brands thanks to digital, because smaller brands now are able to reach consumers in very clever ways. I'm wondering if that's going to come to the region, and if you're seeing some of that already, where local brands are being created. And do you see Pepsi potentially making acquisitions in the region going forward?
We're always open to invest as a company, and I think that we have illustrated that in several occasions in the past 3 years. Of course, you have to make sure that whatever investment opportunity will come will suit the company vision and the direction that we're going to. We have done that in the US recently. Last year, we've put a stake in one of the plant-based companies, and I think this was a very nice investment made by the company because it delivers on the sustainability, delivers on the proposition for a healthier food for the consumer as we move forward. So I would say we'll continue to focus on that, and we'll see how those investments will evolve in the future and how can we take those learnings into other markets as well.
Are you seeing any emergence of that in our part of the world? Is it happening or not really?
It is happening here and there in a very small scale, but I would say, to your point, Middle East is an opportunity to evolve some of that innovations and some of that double down on investment in that direction.
Yes. Yeah, my feeling is we had a first wave of e-commerce, and now the next wave is going to be more direct-to-consumer brands where hopefully you'll see young entrepreneurs developing great brands straight to consumers. So should be an interesting space to watch.
I agree. And let me take you to the second leg of that as well, if we are talking sustainability, because I think recycling, for example, can be a great space for entrepreneurs and even governments and policymakers to invest in, because recycling is a big cause and a big part of the sustainability journey of any big company. So the minute that you have the right infrastructure in place, you will accelerate that journey in a different direction, but also you will integrate a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses comes into that process and have an opportunity to grow as well.
Yes.
So that's another reflection on how can startups and entrepreneurs serve the overall corporates and integrate well into that business cycle.
No, that's absolutely right. Tamer, one last question for you is, you've been a mentor to many entrepreneurs, and I know you've been very active in the ecosystem. As you've seen the growth of the ecosystem in the last couple of years, what is the biggest advice you'd give new entrepreneurs coming in today into the space?
Let me start with educating yourself I would give them the first advice that I will give, that you have to read a lot. You have to educate yourself about the area where you're building your idea about. I think learning the different trends across the region and the world is very important and critical for ideas to shape up. And the minute those great ideas are shaped up, the appeal of funding is more comes their way as well. So I would say investing time in shaping up the idea is the number one priority. Second is making sure that they have the right operating model to generate revenues, because this is how investors are evaluating ideas and making sure that whether they come in with a good stake or not. Third is seek for advice and seek for maybe a good incubator to give them a different coaching and a different mentorship across the business model that they are building. Last point from my side is to be patient, because patience is a very critical skill that everyone has to learn when it comes to startup and entrepreneur. It is really required to give it the right time and to sleep on the idea and make sure that you are coming up with a very solid plan.
Those are all great insights. I would say for patients, it should be on both sides, investors and entrepreneurs.
Correct. I agree.
Especially
100%.
in a challenging market like the Middle East. But there is great opportunity, as you mentioned. Well, Tamer, thank you so much for the time, for the wonderful insights, and we hope to hear from you again soon.
Thank you very much, Amjad. It has been a pleasure seeing you last week and today, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Likewise. Take care. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to empowerME Conversations and rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. For updates on our work, follow us on LinkedIn and at AC Mideast on Twitter, or visit atlanticcouncil.org.